welcome to our Friday Independent Living Skills discussion. For those who have not met me, my name is Catherine. I am a project coordinator here at LVCIL. I am a white female with shoulder length black hair that I have pulled back in a braid today, and I'm wearing a black blouse with white polka dots on. And I'm coming to you from our office here at LVCIL in the Dan Wilson Conference Room. Behind me is a beige colored wall with a plaque, and then above that is a framed picture of Dan Wilson, who is an older white male who's seated at his desk. Just to give you a kind of feel of where I'm at. We'd like to welcome Richard, actually welcome him back. He was here about 3 weeks ago talking about SSI. Today we're going to be learning about SSDI benefits. But before we jump into that conversation, a few logistics for today. We are recording today's session, and we will post that recording to the LVCIL YouTube channel. That will take about a week and a half to get up there. And I will email it out to everybody who registered for today's session. We do invite you to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable. We do ask, though, that you keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. It just helps with the clarity of the recording. Questions are welcome at any time today. So you can use the raise hand feature under the reactions menu bar or the chat box. We will monitor that and read those questions out loud. Captions are available through Zoom. Just click on the CC Live transcript to turn them on. And if you need any other technical assistance, you can drop that in the chat as well, and I will do my best to get to that throughout our morning. But let me introduce Richard. He is the Public Affairs Specialist with the Social Security Administration. As a spokesman for the Social Security Administration in Southeastern Pennsylvania, Richard conducts presentations designed to promote a better understanding of Social Security benefits and services. In addition, he serves as the agency's key contact with social service and government agencies, major employers, and the media. In his career with Social Security, he has worked as a claims representative and served as the disability work incentives expert in the Philadelphia downtown SSA office. He has received numerous awards for his work in both the aging and disabilities community. And we are, again, thankful for Richard and for him giving up some time today to be with us. So I will toss it over to Richard and we'll get his slides up and going.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. And good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. So, yes, as Catherine said, in last month, we did a session on supplemental security income, SSI benefits. So today we're going to do Social Security. We're going to cover basically from the beginning process until somebody gets going with benefits and gets wants to go to work, what happens there. So we're going to go through all that. Catherine, do you want to go full screen on the slides?
Sure.
Yeah.
And can you just confirm that you can see that?
Yeah, I can see it. How about folks? Everybody good?
Okay. Okay, yep, I'm getting that people can see it. Awesome. Thank you, guys. There is a black bar. Okay. We had this last week, so let's see if we can.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go to next. We'll get going here. Okay. Go ahead, Catherine. Okay, so folks, today, as we said, we're going to cover Social Security, disability, and we're going to cover in order the eligibility factors and then the application process. So we're going to start with the beginning, and then we're going to go once somebody gets on the program, if they want to work, how the work rules apply, because that's very important. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit on the Ticket to Work program. So, so go ahead, Catherine. We'll go through. So some of this stuff I'm going to talk about, folks, you may be very familiar with, but I just find it's good to sort of lay the groundwork with the basics anyway. So at the Social Security Administration, we have two benefit programs. Basically, we have Social Security and we have SSI. Today's Social Security, and for that benefit, which I'm sure you're probably aware, is that it is based on someone having worked and paid Social Security taxes as a worker, paid into the system. And we have, under Social Security, we have three categories of benefits. We have retirement, which would be available to someone who's worked at least 10 years and is at least 62 years old. We have disability, which we're going to focus on today. You can be any age if you've worked long enough. You can be a younger person. We'll talk about the requirements at different ages. And under retirement and disability, family members may also receive on the record of the worker. So it could be spouse, could be children, could be former spouse. And then survivors benefits. When the worker passes away, spouse and children could conceivably get benefits on the deceased worker's record. So today, of course, we're going to focus on the middle one, on disability. So, and let me just say this too, just to start. If you deal with Social Security offices and people, sometimes we tend to use our own internal jargon, and you might hear Social Security referred to as Title II. And that's because Social Security, all these benefits come under Title II of the Social Security Act, and SSI is Title 16. So sometimes, just for clarity purpose, just so you know, you can be tuned into this, is that Title II would be a Social Security benefit. Title 16 would be the SSI benefit. Okay, Title 16, of course, was added later than Social Security initially back in the 1930s. SSI came along in the early 70s. So just a little bit of inside information. Title II is Social Security. Title 16 is SSI. Okay, Kat. Now, under Social Security, there's basically two types of disability benefits. One, the most common situation is a worker who's been worked for a period of time, paid into the Social Security system with their taxes, and they become disabled and they're filing on their own work record. So that's one. The other category of folks would be what we call disabled adult child. It's kind of a weird term, but this is someone who's filing on the work record of a parent. That parent has to either be receiving Social Security as a retiree or as a disabled person themselves, or that parent could be deceased and they worked a certain period of time before they died. So the child part of this disabled adult child is that you're receiving benefits based on your parent's work record. You have to be over 18, which would, of course, make you an adult. And you have to have a disability which began any time before the age of 22. So it could have began at birth, could have been sometime later on, but it has to have begun before the age of 22. So we're going to talk about these. Most of the rules are the same, but there are some differences, which I'll point out. So, okay, Catherine, we'll go. So the definition of disability is the same for both a worker's benefit and a disabled adult child. And that is, the individual has to have a physical or mental impairment, which is either expected to last or may have already lasted 12 months or result in death. So that's one part of the definition. The other part is that impairment prevents the person from working at what we call a substantial level. And this year in 2023, substantial level is defined as $1,470 a month or more of earnings, gross earnings. So someone could be working and making less than that, and they could file for disability and be approved because they're not working at a substantial level. So the substantial level is a factor there in determining whether you can get benefits. So this is a two-pronged definition. You have to have the impairment, and it's expected to last a certain period of time, and to prevent you from working at this substantial level. And that level goes up each year. It'll be $1,500 or so next year, but it goes up. Went up a good bit this year because there was a change in the wage levels across the country. It doesn't matter. I see a question in the chat. Does not matter whether work is full-time, part-time. All we're looking at is the amount of earnings a person has in a month. So we don't, unless it's self-employment, we really don't get into how many hours you've worked. It's a matter of the total dollar amount in gross dollars at the end of each month. Okay, Catherine. Now, one of the terms you might hear if you deal with us is the onset of the person's disability, the disability onset date. Now, in normal terms, the onset date would be when the person first got the condition. So it could be at birth for some folks, could be later on. But in this context, the disability onset date, in quotes, refers to the earliest date the person's condition meets our medical requirements, which means it's a severe condition as of a particular point in time, and the person was not working above the substantial level. So for instance, if a person has a medical impairment, which would meet our definition in terms of the severity of the condition, it's severe enough, but the person is, let's say, pushing themselves and working and making more than the 1470, then they would not be eligible for benefits, and we would not yet establish an onset date. Once they either stop working or drop their earnings down below that level, then that could be the first month that we say, okay, the onset of their disability was, March of 2023. Until then, they had the same medical condition, but they were working at a level that was considered substantial. So the onset date is tied to when you meet the two-pronged definition. You have the severe impairment and you're not working at a substantial level. Okay. All right, Captain. And I mention that because it's a factor in how we figure out how much work a person needs, things like that. So now we talked about Social Security. Somebody has to have worked and paid into this system. So we're going to first talk about someone who's working and becomes disabled and they're filing based on their own work history. And for a young person, we'll talk about that in a second too. For a young person, they don't even need that much in terms of earnings, in terms of time worked to be eligible. But what you need, if you're filing on your own work record, you need an overall number of work credits and credits from work that you've done in a recent period of time prior to the onset of your disability. We'll talk about that in a second. Credits in 2023, you earn one work credit for each $1,640 of earnings under Social Security. And you can only earn a maximum of 4 credits in a calendar year, no matter how much you earn. So if you multiply 1640 times 4, that's a little bit over $6,500. As soon as a person earns $6,500, $6,520 to be $6,560 to be exact, as soon as they've done that, they have their 4 credits in the books for 2023, and that's all they can earn in 2023 is 4. That credit level goes up each year. It went up a pretty good bit this year. Next year, I would imagine it's going to be 1,700 or so. So you need an overall number of these credits, and you need work in a recent period of time. So the next slide is going to show primarily for a young person who may have worked a little bit on their own. And if they're filing on their own work record, this is the credit scenario that they have to meet. If they're filing or become disabled before the age of 24, they need 6 credits in the 3-year period prior to their onset. So let's say they're filing at 24 and they've been working for the last couple of years, okay? We would look back at from age 21 to 24, that's a 3-year period, and they could have earned a maximum of 12 credits in those 3 years. You can earn 4 credits in a year, so that could be 12, possibly you could have earned. You need to have 6 at least. So 6 credits is about a year and a half of work, okay? So a young person, they only need a minimum of a year and a half of work if they're filing at this young age. If they're a little bit older, of course, they're going to need a little bit more in terms of credits. So if a person becomes disabled at age 24 or 30, or in the case of a person who may have a disability at birth, they're filing at that age, they need credits for half the time from age 21 up until whatever age they are when they're filing. So let's say they're 27. That would be from 21 to 27 is 6 years. They could earn a maximum of 24 credits in those 6 years if they had 4 for each year. So they would need half of that. They would need 12 credits. Okay, so they would need 3 years of the 6. And then if a person becomes disabled at an older age 31 or older, we will look back at the prior 10 years of work and see that they've worked 5 of those 10 years. So we will look back at a 40 credit period and they need 20 credits in that period of time. So this is the most common situation for people who normally are filing at an older age that want the bullet at the bottom. You need 20 credits in a 40 credit period. Now, we also said that you need an overall number of credits. It doesn't matter what time frame you earned them in. But for young people, they don't need much in terms of overall. And if they met this requirement that we have on the screen now, they would also meet the requirement for overall credits. Somebody who's older, let's say 40 or 50, they would need more credits than just the 20 and the 40 credit period. So for young people, though, this is primarily what's going to determine if they have enough work on their own. And remember, we're talking now about someone filing on their own work record, okay? If you're filing as a disabled adult child, there's no work requirement at all because you're filing on the parent's record, and the parent is the one that needs to have the work credits, okay? So what can happen too, you could have a young person, we're going to talk about disabled adult child, you can have a young person who's receiving on their parent's work record, okay? They're getting that benefit, and then they themselves go to work, and they work a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. At that point now, they're paying into the Social Security system. They could conceivably be switched over to their own disability. And if that's going to render them more money, that's what we would do. So as you work, you're earning credits, okay? All right, Catherine. So if a person needed to file an application for Social Security, there's basically 3 ways you can do this. You can do it online at ssa.gov if you're filing only on your own work record, okay? So not for disabled adult child, they cannot file online. But if you're filing on your own work record, you can do the entire application online. If you don't want to do it online, or as I said, it's a disabled adult child's claim, then it has to be done either by telephone or in the office. So we would set up an appointment. You would call the 800 number, there it is, and they'll set up an appointment and they'll say, okay, you're going to call, the Allentown office on Tuesday morning, whatever, they'll call you, whatever it might be. You would set it up that way. So you can either do it by phone, you can either do it by going into the office, or if you want to file on your own record, then you can do that online. Okay, so that's the way you can do it. One of 3 ways. Okay, Catherine. So the claim is taken. We're going to ask for information about the person's medical condition and who has medical records, whether it's a school, whether it's a hospital or a clinic or whatever. We'll record all that information when we do the application, or you'll give it on if you're filing online. And then that medical information is sent to the state of Pennsylvania, who has what's called a Disability Determination Services site. In this area, there's one in Wilkes-Barre, there's one in Harrisburg. These are people who work for the state of Pennsylvania. We have a contract with the state. They do the medical determinations. The Social Security folks do not do it. And they have disability evaluation specialists, physicians. They're going to go over all the medical records once obtained those, and they're going to make a determination as to whether the person meets the disability requirements. On average, that takes about 90 to 100 days for a decision to be made. I mean, it could be sooner, it could be a little longer, it sort of depends, but ballpark, that's kind of where it's going to be on average. All right, Catherine. So then once a decision is made by the state, then they're going to let us know, the local office, if the claim is an allowance or they say, yes, this person is disabled, then Social Security benefits will be due after there's a 5-month waiting period. And this waiting period, to give you an example how it works out, suppose someone said today was the day of their onset of their disability, March the 10th. And state agency says, yes, this person was disabled as of March the 10th. The 5-month waiting period brings us up to September, because we start with 5 full months, meaning we would start counting with April. So April, May, June, July, August. The entitlement date would be September, and the first Social Security payment will be made in October, because we pay once the month closes, then we make the payment for that month. So once September ends, then we can pay for a benefit in the calendar month of October, but it is a September benefit. So basically, you see, it's kind of 6 months from March of 10th up until October. The only exception to this 5-month waiting period is that disabled adult child's claim. Those individuals do not have to serve a 5-month waiting period. So in this example here, if the onset was in March the 10th, then they would be entitled as of the month of April, and they would get their first check in May. Okay, so they don't have to serve the 5-month waiting period. Under certain conditions, Sometimes too, when a prior disability claim is being reinstated, somebody may have went off the program because of work and now they're coming back on. In some situations, they don't have to serve a 5-month waiting period either. So 5-month waiting period for folks filing on their own work record, no 5-month waiting period if you're filing as a disabled adult child. Okay, Catherine. So just a couple of things about a claim that's being allowed. Maximum payment retroactivity is 12 months prior to the application date. This sometimes comes into play where we pay retroactively because for some reason the person or the family may have delayed a while and not filed the application as soon as they could have. And in that case, there could be a situation where we go back as many as 12 months retroactive. But you always have to take into account the 5-month waiting period when we do our calculations, okay, if it applies to somebody. And also, sometimes you get this retroactive period of payment when somebody had a claim that was initially denied, they appealed it, and then it was approved, and therefore we're going back a good bit, and the new decision is in their favor, and we owe them money for many months in the past. So generally, if somebody files a claim timely, as soon as the person pretty much is possibly eligible, there usually is not retroactivity initially, but that's what can happen sometimes. People ask about that. Okay, Catherine. Now, Medicare, not Medicaid, but Medicare is available to people who are on Social Security disability, but they have to be entitled to Social Security disability benefits for 24 months before that would happen. So if a person becomes entitled at 25, they would have Medicare available to them at 27 if they want it. So after 2 years is when you can potentially get Medicare from the federal government. Okay. All right. Next one, Kat. If the claim was denied, whether it's a claim on the person's own work record or as a disabled adult child, once the individual is notified by mail of the denial, they have 60 days to file an appeal. The first level of appeal is called a reconsideration. In that situation, the claim would go back to the state of Pennsylvania. A whole different team of people who did not work on the first decision would work on the reconsideration. And then they would give you a ruling. It's going to be also a couple months before that happens. If the reconsideration is denied, the person has several other levels of appeal remaining after that. You have a hearing available before an administrative law judge. The person does not have to go to that or appear in person. They can if they want, but they don't have to. And then if that's denied, there's also a couple other levels of appeal, appeals council review, which is held down in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, you do not have to go there. If that would be denied, a person could also file a lawsuit in federal court. So if somebody files a claim and they're denied, we encourage them to appeal it if they feel the decision was wrong, which I assume they would. And you want to keep the claim active because by keeping it active, if you're finally allowed, generally they're going to go back and pay you back to the original application date. If you let it go, if you let more than 60 days pass and you don't have a good reason for not filing an appeal, and then you want to get a claim going again, sometimes they'll just start you with a new application. And then if you're approved, you're only going to be paid back to that second application date. So it's always a good thing to appeal, you know, assuming you want to keep this claim going and keep it be active. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop there because we're going to talk now about a person working after they go on benefits. So do we have any questions about the initial claims process? None, Catherine?
I'm not seeing any in chat.
Okay.
So I guess
Okay.
we will resume our discussion.
Okay, very good. So now we're going to talk about a person who's on disability, working and receiving, and the work incentive program that we have at Social Security. I got to say, I think it's a pretty good program. It gives a person an opportunity. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the rules. We're going to talk about the Red Book, which I think is a good resource for you to refer to, and then a little bit at the end about Ticket to Work. So go ahead, Catherine. So a person who's on Social Security disability, it does not matter whether they're receiving on their own work record or as a disabled adult child. They have what's called a trial work period available to them. And this trial work period means the individual can work in 9 months. Does not matter what they earn. They're going to get their benefit all the way through for the 9 months. They could earn a lot of money, doesn't matter. However, to count as one of the 9 months, the earnings must be at least $1,050 in a particular month, which means if somebody goes out and makes $800, $900 gross, you have to let us know about that, but it's not going to count as using up one of your trial work months. So it has to be at least $1,050, and that figure changes every year. So next year it's going to be $1,100 plus or whatever. These 9 months can be scattered over a 60-month period. So you have to think of this as kind of a rolling 60-month, 5-year period. So if a person would, let's say, work 8 months and stop, if they work in the 9th month, that's in a 5-year period from the very first month of work till the 9th month, then that would complete their trial work period. If they finish the 9th month outside the initial 60-month period, then they would not have completed their trial work period. So it kind of rolls along. Not that a person would do it that way, but I'm just going to give you an example of how this would be counted. So it's over a rolling period. So right now, if a person started working March of 2023, their 5-year period obviously going to run through March of 2028. As soon as they complete 9 months in that 5-year period, then they've completed their trial work period. If they start working in April the first month, then it's going to go to April 2028, and so on. So, but again, to count as a month, you have to earn at least $1,050. Okay, go ahead, Catherine. So once a person does this for 9 months, we're going to look at the work that they've done in terms of the dollar earnings to make a determination as to whether that work is substantial or not substantial. If the work after 9 months averages out to not be substantial, meaning it averages under 1470, then we're going to say, okay, you complete your trial work period, but you're not doing substantial work, so your benefit's just going to continue, and you can keep working at that level. If, however, at the end of the 9 months, your work averages out to be substantial, meaning 1470 or more, then we're going to say, okay, you completed your trial work period. We're going to pay you for what's called 3 more grace months. Grace. They're going to give you months 10, 11, and 12. They're going to pay you. And then the benefit's going to be suspended or stopped. Now, that sounds kind of dire, but it's not really that bad. We go to the next slide. We'll see what happens. So after the 9 trial work months, the 3 grace months, then we're getting into what's called the extended period of eligibility. And this will run for 33 months after the initial 12. So the 9 trial work, the 3 grace months, you're performing FCA, we're going to stop your benefits. You're in this extended period of eligibility for 33 more months. So that's a total of 45 months. It's almost 4 years. And basically what this is, I'm being electrical about the name and all, but basically what it is your benefits will be paid or not paid based on how much work a person does and whether the work is substantial. So during that 45 months up to that month number 45, we will not pay a benefit for any months where the work is substantial. So let's say a person is making $1,500 a month and they keep doing that 5 months in a row. There's going to be no checks for those 5 months. If the next month they drop it down for whatever reason, you'll see the bottom bullet, then we will pay them. If let's say they're sick, they don't work, or maybe they lose the job, or maybe they can't continue the job because of their impairment, whatever it might be, then boom, they get right back on receiving a benefit. So this could be like a roller coaster up and down for a period almost running out to almost 4 years. So a person should not be afraid that, okay, if I go to work and I make a certain amount and I don't get some checks for a while, they're not like terminated from the program or off the program. They're just sort of in a hold status as we look month to month. And you will be letting us know by submitting pay stubs so we know how much the earnings are. If the person makes the same amount all the time, it's easy. But if their earnings fluctuate, then we really got to, stay on that, be on top of it, and make certain we have the right total amount for the month. Okay, Catherine. Now, one provision that people have available to them, it doesn't come up that much, but it's what's called impairment-related work expenses. If the individual needs certain items or services or things to help them, do their job, it could be help getting ready for work in the morning. It could be some special transportation they need. Could be some items they need to work at the job, whatever it might be. The cost of these items can sometimes be deducted from the earnings amount, and that'll determine eventually whether the person is working at a substantial level or not. For instance, the example here in blue, person earns $1,600 in a month. Well, $1,600 on the surface is over the $1,470. Therefore, that would be substantial work. Therefore, that would mean no check. However, in that month, the person has impairment-related work expenses that cost them $175. We would deduct the $175 from the $1,600 and say, okay, what you actually earned and what we're going to count is $1,425. $1,425 being below the $1,470 allowance means it's not substantial, which means they would receive their benefit for that month, even though they made $1,600. Now, these expenses must be paid for by the individual. They can't be reimbursed by like an insurance company or something like that. There's a reasonable amount that's attached to different types of services, and they have to pay for the item in the particular work month. So they did it in March of 2023. They received these services. They have to pay for them in March of 2023. So we would ask you about that when a person's going to work. Do you have any special expenses, things like that? A lot of times the person doesn't have this. Sometimes folks who have a visual impairment or blind, sometimes they need special assistance, but it could be a lot of different things. And we will ask about that. So that's something also to keep in mind. Go ahead. So we said this extended period of eligibility runs for up to month number 45. That's the last month of their extended period. What happens if a person works after month 45? Well, if they do substantial work any month after number 45, their eligibility is terminated. And that sounds a little dire, but next slide, it really is not that bad. Next slide. Technically, they are considered to be terminated, but there's a provision called expedited reinstatement. If their earnings fall below the 1470 substantial amount, then we will reinstate them without any new application being needed. As long as this situation occurred within 5 years of when they were terminated, they can get right back on as long as they have the same disability, okay? And they can receive up to 6 months of benefits and Medicare while we're awaiting a decision, because we're going to have to make a new decision as to whether they're still disabled. But initially, we will start to pay them. You don't have to go through a whole application. You're just going to have to provide some updated information. So again, you're talking almost 4 years from when the person first started to work in their trial work period before this would even happen. And they have to be making a certain amount of money. So, that's why people should not be afraid to work, because in most cases, you're going to be able to retain your benefit, or because you're making a certain amount of money, you have the income from the earnings. So just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead. Next one, Catherine. Medicare. We mentioned that a person gets Medicare after being 2 years on cash benefits for Social Security. Well, again, now here, people should not be afraid they're going to lose their Medicare if they go to work, because after they complete their 9 months of trial work, Medicare can continue for another 93 months, regardless of how much money they're earning. So 93 plus 9, that's 102 months. That's 8.5 years. A person would certainly keep their Medicare as long as they have the same disability for 8.5 years after when they first start their trial work period. And then even if they reach that level of 8.5 years, they can still retain it if they want to continue to pay for their Medicare. Okay, so initially, I don't think people should be worried about that, because you're talking a good bit of years of work before that would happen. So go ahead, Catherine. All right, so one of the things I mentioned early on was the Red Book. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Red Book is a publication that we used to have in the offices, and it has a red cover. That's why it's called the Red Book. But we have it online at our website. You can see it online. It's, I don't know, it's probably like 60 pages long. It covers the SSI and Social Security work incentives, all the things we're talking about here. And you can also order one if you want from our headquarters in Baltimore. They will send you a hard copy. You can get that if you want it. But keep that in mind, because that has all these provisions that I'm talking about. It even has some other things that I haven't mentioned here because they don't happen as often. So I left some things out because, we will be here for a long time going through work incentives. So keep that in mind. It's a good book to have. Okay, next one, Catherine. And the last couple slides here are about the Ticket to Work program. You've probably heard about that. This is a voluntary program that's open to anybody who's on disability, whether it's Social Security or SSI, from age 18 or older. And under the Ticket to Work program, a person can receive free employment services. They can get career counseling. They can go through voc rehabilitation. They can get job training. They can get job placement. Again, strictly voluntary. You can sign up for it. If you don't like it, you can drop it. It doesn't matter. It's designed to help people become self-sufficient. In time, the purpose of this program is to help people actually get off benefits because they're working and making enough money. So go ahead, next slide, Catherine. And under the Ticket to Work program, companies, private companies, and in some cases, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation from the state, provide services. You can pick a provider and you could say, I'm going to cast my ticket with this particular provider. And you can go online to this website. It's called Choose Work. And you can put in where you live. You live in this particular county. You live in Northampton. You live in Lehigh County, wherever you might live. And you'll see what providers are offering services under the Ticket to Work program. Usually you'll find about 20 or so. And they provide the assistance that we talked about. You can pick providers based on a person's disability, a type of condition they have, and you can search through, and there's information about the services which can be provided either in person or virtually. So this program hasn't been utilized as much as our agency would like to see people use it. But the key thing here is that these providers, which have been approved by the government, they do not get reimbursed in any way unless the individual that they're working with gets a job and makes enough money to not receive a benefit. So the theory is that they have an incentive to work with you to help you get a job because that's the only way they're going to get paid in working with somebody. So it's something to look at. As I said, if you start on it and maybe you start with the company and after a while you feel it's not working, you can withdraw from that, be involved with that company. You can hook yourself up with another company and so on. You only be hooked up with one company at a time, though. So it's something to look at. So, all right, Catherine, I believe that's the last one. So we're open for questions if people have any.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in chat right now, but.
Well, I like to say either that means I was perfectly clear or I confuse people so much that they don't know what to ask. So hopefully it's clear.
Yeah. And we will, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we will send out a copy of the slides and the recording because I know there were a couple of people that reached out to me wanting to attend but had conflicts. So
yeah. And one thing too to keep in mind, you could have a person who's receiving both Social Security and SSI at the same time. And in that case, you have to keep up on the different rules because the work incentive rules, which we talked about last time for SSI, are completely different in terms of how they're looked at and earnings are looked at. And therefore you could have could be sort of a confusing situation because you have two sets of rules that you have to be concerned with. But nonetheless, that's something that we would work with you on that. You can always ask us about that.
Okay.
All right.
Still not seeing anything. We did have a question about a hard copy of the presentation. Like I said, I will get those slides out.
Okay.
All right. Well then, like to thank Richard for the great presentation. As we end out today, though, I am going to ask people that are here with us live if they will complete a quick poll, help get ideas for future presentations that you would like to see. So I'm going to launch that right now. So if you could take just a few minutes to answer those 4 questions, and I will read them out. So question 1, have you attended one of our events before? And asking you to then rate today's presentation overall. And did you learn something new because of today's discussion? And then the final question, do you have a suggested speaker or topic? And for those who answer yes, I will reach out to you via email to talk to you about your presenter or topic that you would like to see. But I know I will say I have learned something new, and this is probably the 3rd time I've heard Richard present. There's always different things I'm thinking about. Definitely that choose to work, something that I know want to promote more with our young adults who are coming out of high school in a couple months. Goodness, we're in March, so they'll be graduating. That might be a great option for them. So, all right. Well, again,
All right.
yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I will leave the meeting open for just a couple more minutes as responses come in. And oh, we do have a question. So TTW, Ticket to Work, is available for both SSI and SSDI?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and it's really, as Catherine said, it's really something to really check out. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it. You can get a job on your own, of course, the traditional way, whatever. But if you check it out, it might give you some ideas. And there's no downside really to doing it, because you can always drop out if you don't like it. You can always switch the company. So just something to look over and get yourself familiar with.
Okay.
Somebody asked what other benefits of Ticket to Work. The one benefit is that technically everybody on disability, everybody has to be medically re-examined every so many years. It could be 1 year, it could be 3 years, it could be 7 years after their initial determination. If you're in the Ticket to Work,
Uh-oh. I think Richard froze on us.
so
there we go.
That's one thing that's considered sort of an advantage. But I don't know if that's that big of a deal to people, but that's the one thing. But there really is no downside to it.
All right.
Didn't hear you because you froze. We didn't hear you because you froze. Can you repeat the benefit?
Yeah. What I was saying was that everybody who's on disability, everybody, no matter what age, in theory, it has to be medically re-examined so many years after their initial allowance. So it could be 1 year, it could be 3 years, it could be 7 years. At least that's the regulations, to make certain that they still have the medical disability. But if you're using the Ticket to Work, that's one thing that will not happen during the time that you're actively involved with a Ticket to Work program. You will not be re-examined. So for some people, that's an important thing. They don't have to bother with that. But that's one of the advantages, in addition to just the training you might get and hopefully a job placement. That's about it, really.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I've got a thumbs up. So got an answer to our question.
All right. All right. So I get off?
So thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.